Welcome once again to the Davos brainstorm here at the World Economic Forum. The world in Trumpian turmoil, and what happens next? To join us now are two very special guests. Privileged to be joined by Gideon Rachman. He's the chief foreign affairs commentator for the venerable Financial Times. Also joined by the global affairs columnist for the Washington Post, Ishaan Tharoor. Appreciate both of you joining us. Couldn't have chosen a better moment to talk to both of you. And let's start with the latest conflict that's convulsing the world, which is Greenland. Donald Trump making it clear he wants Greenland by hook or crook in a way. Gideon, your first response. Are we heading now for an inevitable conflict between Europe and America over Greenland? And do you see a pushback, or Donald Trump taking it over much in the manner that he took over Venezuela just a week ago?
Well, I think we're already in the conflict. The question is how it develops from here. I actually don't think the Americans are going to do military action as a first resort, or they may not do it at all, because I think that would be so drastic. I think people around Trump would try to restrain him. But I do think that they are going to ramp up the pressure on Europe in ways that lead to an intensifying kind of confrontation. They will do these tariffs, probably, unless maybe the Supreme Court comes to our rescue and says the tariffs are illegal. Europe will hit back with tariffs. I'm pretty sure about that. And then I think Trump has this tendency to link security and economics. So I think he will then cut off arms sales to Ukraine. Actually, it's the Europeans buy the arms from America and hand them over to Ukraine. Do what he can to put Ukraine in an even worse situation than it is now, which then threatens European security. And then the question is really, can NATO survive all of this? It may survive as a sort of nameplate on a door, but I'm not sure it's really a function.
Are you seeing a European pushback then? Do you believe the Europeans will push back? Donald Trump's written a letter to the Norwegians suggesting that because they didn't give him a Nobel Peace Prize, he has no interest in peace. Are you seeing the Europeans push back, or will they just have to accept that might is right?
No, I think they will push back. I mean, maybe that's me as a European, and of course Britain's no longer a member of the EU, but interestingly is signing all the letters with the Europeans. They've absolutely sided with Europe on this one. And the UK political leaders are united on this, the Conservatives and Labour, saying this is unacceptable from Trump. So oddly, Trump's pushing Britain back towards Europe. So I think there'll be pushback. I wouldn't completely rule out Europe folding. I think they're desperately searching for some sort of compromise, but I don't think Trump is in a compromising mood, and if there's no compromise to be had, Europe will have to push back.
Ishaan, Trump is not in a compromising mood. Is he determined, particularly after what happened in Venezuela, to make sure that Greenland comes next? Is there any possibility of Trump pulling back? The Financial Times memorably last year says, Taco, Trump always chickens out. Is he going to chicken out of Greenland, or is he determined to go ahead with it? And what is driving this so-called Donroe doctrine, as he puts it?
You know, it's quite fascinating. If you look at the national security strategy that came out from the White House just a few months ago, there's barely a word about Greenland in there. There's no official policy in this administration anchored around security strategy in the Arctic with Greenland. But this is very much the personal conviction of President Trump. President Trump has gotten his head that this is something the U.S. must have. And absolutely, when you talk about the Donroe Doctrine, it is this kind of 21st century manifest destiny of the United States that he seems to feel that he's capable of exerting. He believes that, absolutely, as his advisor Stephen Miller said on TV, the iron law of the world is might makes right. And they can do what they want in the Western Hemisphere because they deserve to. And that is it's a set of impulses less than a strategy at this point, and it also flows out of a kind of culture war within the United States. He still sees himself at war with the left at home, and he extends that to a broader war with a kind of global liberal establishment, the Davos class on a certain level, the custodians of the international order, the UN. And it all flows out of that kind of animus and hostility. So if you're looking for a strategy, that's basically it. But even then, it doesn't fully explain what's happening with Greenland and why it matters so much to Trump.
Why does it matter so much to Trump? It comes if it's not about strategy, if it's about just individual impulse, With Venezuela, when he makes a speech, he doesn't speak about democracy, human rights. He ends up speaking mainly about oil.
I'll let Ishaan answer, but just a quick one. I think it's because it's big. It's on the side. It's a big place, even bigger on the Mercator projections on the maps. So it looks like it's the size of Africa. It's about a fifth the size of Africa. And he thinks, wow, I can put my face and the American flag on this, and I'll be really great, and everyone will really admire me for this. I don't think there's anything more than that.
The joke absolutely is that he's seen the Mercator projection as opposed to the actual map. There's an American tradition about wanting Greenland. In the mid-19th century, when Seward bought Alaska, he also wanted to buy Greenland. And then, at that point in time, they saw it as if they have Alaska, if they have Greenland, then by extension they should logically get Canada. And Trump has also talked about the artificial nature of the U.S.-Canada border. So it's a quite hysterical vision of kind of American expansion in the 21st century. But look, I think the fundamental reality is that we are now in a situation where Trump's personality drives American policy, where there's no legislative check against him because the Congress is not doing what it's supposed to be doing. The Republican Party is wholesale captured by him still, and you've seen very little dissent, even by legislators who we know in private are tearing their hair out over some of Trump's rhetoric and posturing.
So you see him going ahead with it. Yeah, you don't see this as posturing. You don't see Donald Trump using this then to strike some kind of a bargain. You see him going ahead and capturing Greenland in 2026.
No, I wouldn't say that. I think there are a lot of things that would have to happen for that to happen. But I do think he will use it as it will be a fly in the ointment in the American-U.S. relationship. As Gideon said, it could foil European hopes for the U.S. to play a sustainable and good role in whatever happens in Ukraine. And we'll see how things evolve. But, Trump likes to have these hobby horses that he, beats over time.
Yeah, I think one thing that could stop him is you're beginning to see the markets go down quite sharply today. And if you mentioned the whole taco thing, that was really in response to a market crash after the Liberation Day tariffs. Trump changed his mind. And I think if the markets really go down, if the bond market, if Europeans start selling, American debt, that is the kind of thing that might cause him. He won't drop it. He'll just change the subject.
Can I just look at this Donroe doctrine for a little bit, for a bit, because Gideon, you wrote a column in the Financial Times suggesting that if this spheres of influence argument goes further, if the Americans decide the Western Hemisphere is ours, it's Venezuela one day, it could be Colombia the next, it could be Cuba the third, it could be Greenland. The Chinese tomorrow could say the South China Sea is ours, Taiwan is ours, and where does it all end? Do you see, therefore, are we inexorably heading towards a US-China battle for spheres of influence? If Donald Trump is allowed to get away now, the Chinese tomorrow could get away with Taiwan, and that could have implications for countries like India as well.
Totally. Taiwan and indeed the South China Sea. I mean, reading Trump's letter that you referred to about how the Danish claim to Greenland is just based on, a few ships. It's very similar to the kind of arguments China makes about the South China Sea. This is all lost in the midst of time. We have as legitimate a claim as everybody else. So Trump is legitimating that form of argument. We're the most powerful people here. We can make up any argument that we like, and we're just going to grab it and see what you can do. And international laws are jokes, so don't even try and stop us. Those are Trump's arguments, and those, actually put rather more subtly, are also China's arguments. And if Trump concentrates on the Western Hemisphere, the Chinese will think, great, we'll take our sphere. And incidentally, their sphere is a much bigger share of the global economy. So it would be a crazy deal for America to accept that.
So could there be a check on Trump? The fact that the fear that someone in the White House or someone in America will say, look, if we go ahead with doing this, the Chinese could well have their sphere of influence. Could that be a check? Or is Trump not worried about the consequences of a Donroe doctrine across the world?
I don't think they see it in those frames. I don't think they see China as inexorably taking what it wants. But I think what's interesting about this framing of the Donroe doctrine is that it comes from a political movement in the United States that believes in the kind of the supremacy of its power and
make America great again.
Yes, and they feel entitled to wield their power as they see fit, whatever the rules, whatever the norms, whatever the international considerations. What's interesting about how it's being framed is that it's actually in many ways a shrinking of American power. It's so much of what's constituted American power over the last generation or multiple generations has been its capacity to project strength around the world through soft power, through alliances, through trade, and this seems to be a withdrawal. I mean, Trump is withdrawn from numerous international agencies. He's endangering the transatlantic alliance in profound ways. And so in many ways, the view in Washington amongst this foreign policy establishment is that the Domino Doctrine is a retreat.
So could he be willing to risk this transatlantic alliance? Could he be willing to risk NATO, the post-World War II order, possibly even retreat from Ukraine and say, look, this is for Europe and Putin to decide, I'm out of it? Is that possible?
Their view is that the post-World War II order is failing. And their view is that the post-World War II order is no longer fit for purpose. And that we have to build something else out of its ruins.
Gideon?
I think
You see, he could withdraw out of the transatlantic alliance and say, allow Vladimir Putin to have his own sphere of influence in Europe, including Ukraine?
he's pretty close to that already. I mean, I think we're 50% of the way there. Sure, I think that is where we're heading, I'm afraid.
Where Ukraine would be left towards, the Americans would not want to play a role in Ukraine?
The Americans have cut off aid to Ukraine already. I mean, they don't do financial aid or arms aid of the scale that the US was doing under Biden. What they do is sell weapons to the Europeans, which the Europeans can then hand on to Ukraine, and they provide intelligence, which is really, really important to Ukraine in the battle to stop the Russians. Now, President Macron of France, interestingly, said just recently that France now provides 80% of the intelligence that Ukraine needs. I sincerely hope that is true, because in that case, Ukraine can fight on. But if not, they could be in serious trouble, because so much of this is done with satellites and drones.
So what happens to the Ukraine war? Does it continue through 2026? What's your sense? Are we heading through a situation where the Ukrainians find themselves increasingly vulnerable and isolated?
Look, I think just to piggyback on what Gideon was talking about, the Trump folks will tell you that this is all a good thing, that Europe should be taking the lead on all this, that we have instigated a change within Europe that was fundamentally necessary. And I think some Europeans would agree that we shouldn't be so dependent on a certain U.S. commitment indefinitely and at scale. When it comes to this year in Ukraine, I think it's a very complicated situation. President Zelensky faces a quagmire at home politically as well. But obviously, the Europeans have rallied around him. They want to give Ukraine the support it needs to have a strong seat at the bargaining table. But it really is, in terms of what happens next, it really is, we're waiting for actual good faith from the Russians, and we've yet to see it.
Can I come back to China for a moment? Because it is the other dragon in the room. If Trump is the elephant, China is the dragon in the room. I mean, how do you see this Chinese-US equation playing out in the next 12 months?
I think Trump has handed China a massive opportunity, because despite the fact that Biden is often sort of slagged off as a weak president, actually he'd done something really quite important, which was to construct a kind of global Western alliance, which was steadily squeezing China's space, which to my mind actually included India, but also included, the Europeans, the Australians, Japanese.
Groups like the Quad, for example.
Absolutely. And Trump has trashed that and is driving people back towards China. So Canada Mark Carney's just been in Beijing, signed a trade deal with China, and other Europeans will be heading in that direction. Canada's not European, spiritually perhaps. But, I remember this time last year, I had a meeting with a sort of senior British security type, and I said to him, look, the way Trump's behaving, would it be such a bad idea to warm up to China? And he said, yeah, that would be a really terrible idea. And he laid out for me why we should not do that. But I suspect if we had that conversation again, I think it's certainly on the table now.
The other the achievement, or Trump builds as an achievement, is now the setting up of a border peace for Gaza. He's invited India, for example, to be part of the border peace. Do you see, therefore, a more stable 2026 in the Middle East, or that's with Netanyahu in Israel, with the Iranians potentially seen by Trump as another enemy country in the area? How do you see that play out? Do you see any kind of in this increasingly uncertain, unstable world? Could we see some glimmer of hope at all in the Middle East, or no? I mean, what sense does this board of peace really make?
I mean, I think it's far too early to tell to say anything definitive about what this board of peace will accomplish, let alone what this board of peace actually is. It's a confusing mix of governments and figures, and what Trump wants to do with it. It seems from the reporting and from what we're hearing is that he wants to wield it in such a way that it jostles with the existing international architecture that exists around peacemaking, the UN system, and so forth. So it's his desire for what it's going to be is quite grand. When it comes to finding a path out in Gaza, there is this Trump 20-point plan. The Trump folks believe that it's in motion now. What we're seeing on the ground is a little bit different. And then, of course, there are a lot of things happening in the region that are very complicated. You're seeing a major rift blow out in the open between the Saudis and the Emiratis. You're going to have elections at some point in Israel that will complicate the equation there as well. And then there's, of course, the developments in Iran. So there's a lot happening right now.
Where does all these where do these disruptions leave countries like India? Countries that would probably benefit from a more stable world order. We found ourselves in the crosshairs of Donald Trump over tariffs, because we were buying Russian oil. What can India do? Do countries like India really have any elbow room, you believe, Gideon, or any role at all to play in this increasingly uncertain world order where even the United Nations appears completely enfeebled?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an incredibly complicated and difficult situation, but it is one that offers opportunities for India because, yes, I think, clearly it's been shown over the past year that putting your faith in Donald Trump is not a great idea because you can have a wonderful meeting with him in May and a disastrous meeting with him in June. Nothing lasts with him. He'll change his mind. And, you've got real problems with China, with Pakistan, etc. But you also, obviously, India has enormous strengths. It's a huge country, now the largest population in the world, one of the 5 largest economies in the world. So as everybody is looking to diversify their relationships away from the United States, which essentially is what America's allies have to do, they'll all look to India. Everybody will see India as an essential partner. So, the UK has done a trade deal with India, the EU will want to do it, South Korea, Japan, everybody's going to want to intensify relations with India right across the board, economic, security, etc. And, I don't expect, India's not a country that joins formal alliances, but it will have many opportunities.
Ishaan, I interviewed your father, Shashi Tharoor, a few weeks ago, and he said, years ago I said the world would be multi-aligned, not multipolar, but multi-aligned. Do you see that happening? And countries like India will therefore have their alignments in a way with different potential bilateral partners. You'll see more bilateralism and possibly multilateralism as we knew it fading away because there's very little common ground across the world, but there's lots of common ground between countries, and that's where India's future also lies.
Yeah, I think Gideon's newspaper put it best a few years ago when they summoned this concept of the a la carte world order, where you can pick and choose in different moments the arrangements you want on your plate, and I think that is certainly where we're headed. I think that's sort of the worldview of the Trump people. That's the worldview of many in the global South, and I think the one way to spin this positively is that it's at least honest. It's at least we don't have to appeal to certain values and rhetoric that are constantly dispensed with when it's convenient. But it also leads to profound uncertainty. It leads to scenarios where you see rogue governments, bad actors acting with impunity all the more.
I think we'll miss hypocrisy. At least in the old days, there were like values you could appeal to, and occasionally you could shame people and say, look, this isn't consonant with what you'd say. And it did sometimes affect their behavior. But now, I don't know what you do.
Because you're in this age of these strongmen, who have little place for democracy. That's right, the era of the strongman across the world. But in this era of the strongman, can we even predict where we will be 12 months from now if we all meet in Davos again? Will the world be a better place, you believe, a quieter place, or are we going to live in a world of perpetual conflict and noise for a while longer?
I suspect it's going to be the latter. And Gideon and I were with your network a year ago here, and we we speculated, is Trump going to be this? This is at a moment of relative optimism about what Trump could be. And we speculated, is he going to be some kind of custodian of a positive shift, or is he going to be more of a mafia boss? And I think he's answered quite definitively on the side of being more of a mafia boss.
Yeah. And the thing about mafia families is you can get periods of peace, but then eventually they start shooting at each other.
We're looking at the US president, arguably the most powerful man in the world at the moment, and calling him a mafia boss.
I have no problem.
We did this a year ago. On this network.
No, I mean, I think that, yeah, you know, his whole modus operandi is, I mean, I don't know, I've never met a real mafia boss, but the ones in the movies, very reminiscent.
Let's leave it there, Gideon and Ishaan. I think we've got plenty of food for thought, and we'll wait and see where the mafia boss and his mafiosi take the world a year from now. We can only hope that we will at least see a few rays of light in what seems at the moment to be a rather difficult world. Ironically, the World Economic Forum has branded this year the spirit of dialogue. I don't know where the dialogue's coming in this world of seemingly perpetual conflict. You would have suggested possibly a better a title than the spirit of dialogue.
Well, I mean, there's I think Ishaan was saying before we came on, you know, it's kind of a vain hope rather than a reality. But I mean, I suppose all one can say is people are still talking, because Trump will be here, the Secretary General of NATO will be here, Macron, etc. So they'll talk to each other. I'm not sure there'll be a positive outcome then.
More often than not, world leaders at the moment seem to talk at each other rather than talk to each other. Ishaan Tharoor, Gideon Rachman, great pleasure having you here at the Davos brainstorm. We'll have plenty more of such formidable voices telling us what's happening across the world at a time which many believe is the most complex geopolitical environment since 1945. Thanks for watching. Rajdeep Sardesai in Davos.
Golf kicking off from here in Bangalore from the Karnataka Golf Association.